Viraj. Congratulations on being awarded the Young Alumni Achievers Award.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you on campus. When was the last time you were here?
I think I was here 3 or 4 years ago for a reunion.
Okay.
I think our batch was celebrating its get together, so we were all here back then. But haven't been here for 4 years or so, and it's wonderful to be here.
Always happy to have you. So right after IIMA, you went to McKinsey, right?
Correct.
And you spent about 5 years there.
Correct.
And then you made the switch to Warburg Pincus.
Correct.
So what's about Warburg Pincus that's kept you there for 14 long years?
So I think let me start with McKinsey
Okay.
because that was the foundation. I think it was probably the best career choice I made coming out of IIMA Ahmedabad. I'm very thankful to the campus for having given me the platform that allowed me to go to McKinsey. I think it's the best training ground for someone who doesn't have prior business experience. And the main skill I got there was really how do you take unstructured business problems in the real world and structure them and solve them in a sensible manner. I think that was then the stepping stone for me to go to Warburg. I think the reason I joined Warburg was, back in 2005, private equity was just about getting started in India. It was a very attractive sector for a young manager out of McKinsey. I was very lucky to get that opportunity. And what really attracted me was the lure of the investing world. Moving to the buy side, making decisions as opposed to advising people. I think the right question is the one you asked me, which is why have I stayed 14 years, not why I joined. And I think there are a few reasons why I stayed. I think first, Warburg is probably the oldest private equity firm in India. We've been here 25 years. And I think that's an unparalleled track record of investing in the country, which is a big advantage when you go out to meet entrepreneurs and talk to them about raising capital from you. I think they really value your expertise, your long track record in India. The second reason I've stayed is it's truly a decentralized firm. The thing with private equity is most firms are US headquartered firms, and then they tend to have offices in India and China and other markets. But the decision making is always very centralized, and it's back in New York or London. But Warburg's always had this philosophy of being a very decentralized partnership, and I think that ability to be empowered is terrific, and I think that's what keeps me at Warburg. I think the last reason I've stayed is I think I truly found my calling. With a career, you always have to say, why are you doing what you're doing? Is it about the reputation, the financial security? I think at some stage in your life, all of that becomes less meaningful. The reason I enjoy what I do is because I help make entrepreneurs successful. And that's what makes me really, that's my calling. And that's what I enjoy doing. And I think Warburg provides me that platform.
So in your current role as the managing director at Warburg, how have you been able to leverage opportunities in business services and technology, media, telecommunications? These are the sectors that you're fairly active in.
Yeah. So so stepping back a little bit, Warburg is essentially a sector agnostic fund. So we're investing across all sectors: financial services, real estate, TMT, business services, etc. As I think about my role in the firm, there are really three themes that I look to invest behind. The first theme is really the rising Indian middle class, and how do you invest behind that theme? So Warburg is an investor in Airtel's DTH business, which is their satellite TV business. It's a 4,000 crore business, highly profitable, and TV is still a growing medium in India. I serve on the board of that company, and it's a very interesting way to play the both the telecom infrastructure trend, but also the consumer trend in India. The second theme that I focus my time on is how do you enable, how do you create enabling Indian infrastructure to help the country develop? So, for example, e-commerce is very exciting in India, but e-commerce wouldn't survive if all you had is a website where you could order. You ultimately need, the whole pipe. You need an entire supply chain to deliver those goods. So we've thought about how do you create the supply chain behind e-commerce to enable e-commerce to grow. So we've invested heavily in logistics. You think about, today everyone's talking about AI and machine learning and everything moving to the cloud. But you then have to say, look, ultimately you need big capacity data centers where Microsoft and Google can store, data and take space. So we're actively building an Asia-wide data center business. So again, just examples of saying, look, how do you create the enabling infrastructure, for the economy to ultimately succeed. The third theme that I invest behind is how do you leverage the Indian cost base and talent base to serve global markets. So we're actively, looking at technology services businesses. We're backing a very high quality team that came out of Genpact and helping them find a BPO business that we can transform. So again, I won't bore you with all the details, but I think really what we're doing is saying, look, what is it that the Indian economy gives you in terms of skills and and capability and market opportunity, and how do you then translate that into investment ideas?
Yeah, so one of the things that you mentioned was your exposure to the logistics industry. So, what do you think about the significant infrastructure challenges that the industry faces in terms of cold storages, warehouses, transportation, etc. What do we need to do to to be where we need to be?
Yeah, I think it's a very good question, and it's one that's kept me thinking now for many years. If you look at India, we're over a $2 trillion economy. The annual spend in logistics is 150 billion, and it's still growing very rapidly. But it's a broken industry. There are very fragmented small companies, with fairly archaic business practices, no technology, and I think that has been the bane of the sector for many years. It's a travesty that for a country of our size, we have maybe one company with $1 billion market cap in the logistics space. So clearly, there's a lot of opportunity over there. I think, to be fair, the government's done some very interesting things to enable, growth of logistics going forward. And I would name two. One is the road infrastructure in this country is actually better than you and I sitting in Ahmedabad or Delhi or Bombay would believe. And I think the government's done a tremendous job in creating that road infrastructure, which then, really allows logistics businesses to, to do what they need to do. The second is really the introduction of GST, which I think has really been a watershed event. If you go back 10 or 15 years for tax reasons, any company would need to have small warehouses in each state. Today with India being basically one big unified tax market, companies can now can now really set up a few large warehouses without caring about state borders. And that then just makes everything far more efficient. It creates the opportunity for players of scale to come in. And I think the role we are playing, in sort of our capacity as investors, is to try and shape the sector. With private equity, often what I find is, large funds will wait for the $100-200 million deal to show up. What we've done is we've gone the other way and said, look, if logistics is such a sunrise sector, how do we go find the right talent, the right entrepreneurs, and back them with capital, give them the right strategic advice, and help them get the right technology to go create the next $10 billion companies that should get created. So we're in partnership with Embassy Group creating a large warehousing business. We're invested in a trucking business called Revigo. We have one of India's largest e-commerce logistics companies called Ecom Express, and with Anshuman Singh, who was the former CEO and co-founder of Future Supply Chain, which is Kishore Bayani's logistics business. We've created a company called Stellar Value Chain, which does more warehouse management. So we're doing our part to say, let's find the right talent who has the track record of having built businesses, maybe not on their capital, but for for other entrepreneurs like Kishore Bayani, for example, and then really back them and help them grow. And I think our confidence and belief in India as an economy, helps us make those bets and say, let's start smaller. Let's not wait for that $150 million deal to show up. Let's put 20, 30, $40 million behind an entrepreneur, and over time we will scale that. So we're doing our bit. I think the government has honestly done a fair bit, and I think there is more to be done on the the rail sector, for example, and the freight corridor. But I think the government is really thinking about it the right way, and I'm pretty confident that the sector is going to go places in India.
So, what do you want to see happen in the next 2, 3 years, 4 years?
You know, from a you mean from a government?
From the government infrastructure development perspective.
I actually believe that just let the private sector be, and sometimes the fear I have is if you tend to overregulate sectors, it actually creates issues. I think all the government needs to do is sort of work towards the freight corridor, which they're doing a good job of. I think there are some bottlenecks on the port side which need to be opened up. But I think really the government has created an enabling environment for private capital to now come in and flourish. So I'm pretty hopeful that under the new leadership, the new government, I think they're going to continue to do things. I won't point to any one big silver bullet. I think the big silver bullet was GST. I think that is getting implemented. Obviously, with all these implementations, it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But they've done what they can, and I think things are headed in the right direction.
How do you see the investment trends changing in 2019 and beyond?
I think as you step back, people think about. So let me start with the India macro environment. Right? I think it's pretty mixed. There are positives, there are negatives. In the near term, I think there are concerns around the liquidity challenge with the whole NBFC issue that's playing out. You can see and hear that businesses are doing good but not great. GDP growth is tepid, plus it's not fantastic. Private capex hasn't really picked up in the way that you would want it to pick up. But if you look at it from a global perspective, we complain about India growing at 6% or 6.5%. The truth is, there are very few $2 trillion plus economies in the world, if any, that are growing at even that rate. So we're actually, as you look at it, this is probably one of the most, if not the most attractive markets for private capital to flourish over the next 10, 15, 20 years. I think we're at the start of a multi-decade run of good growth in India, and I really see we have a serious shot at becoming a good $10 trillion economy. Now, is it preordained? Of course not. Will we have challenges and glitches? Of course we will. But I think India is one of the most attractive markets to be. Um, Now, what are the trends? I mean, I think one of the things that we're seeing is there's obviously a lot of capital that's available, but really looking for the right investment ideas. Um, Investment ideas still aren't easy to come by. I think in an Indian context, you've got to work much harder to create a deal that's interesting to a fund of our size, than in some of the other markets like China and the US. But I think some of the trends we are seeing is that second generation business owners, third generation business owners have realized that look, it's not easy running a business in India. Many of them have seen some of what's played out in the last 10 years, and therefore I think there was this time when Indian entrepreneurs used to feel like they need to own a business for generations. I think now people are saying that look, if I'm not the best owner of this business and someone else can do a better job with it, why don't we sell the business? So I think therefore we're seeing a lot more buyout opportunities. On the other side, you're also now seeing a deep bench of professional managers. I mentioned Anshuman in Stellar. He may not have created a business using his own capital, but he did it for another large group like the Future Group. A bunch of executives we are backing in Genpact, ex-Genpact. So I think a lot of Indian professionals have created a track record where you feel like if you can marry them with the right business opportunity and the right buyout opportunity, I think there's a lot of value to be created, and I think that's where we're spending a lot of time, trying to marry those two together. I don't think there is a sector lens to say, look, this sector is less interesting and that sector is more interesting. I think the opportunities are across the board, but you cannot approach this from a macro perspective. So it's also very easy to get taken into saying, oh, India's a great potential market and let's go invest in everything. I think it's ultimately our business is a micro business. You have to find the company with the right competitive advantage, with the right management team, put in place the right systems and processes to help it grow. So I think you have to be very micro, but those opportunities can come in any sector. So I think we're pretty bullish on the outlook. Again, like I said, not without risk, but I think the next 5 to 10 years. I mean, and sort of the other point I would make is as Warburg itself. I look back at my career 12 or 13 years ago. It would be very interesting for us to look at a 50 or a $75 million deal. Today, the deal sizes have increased tremendously. They are 100, 200, $300 million opportunities. So I think I think the market has really matured, and I think we're in a good spot. As you look out.
But having said that, do you think that you need more of a sort of lens on how to deal with investments, how to deal with you know there's a general idea that's kind of coming across which talks about India needing an investment czar for to break out of the middle income trap and to deal with stressed investments. So what do you feel about that?
So again, as you look at the last few years, let's see some of the things the government has done already, and it's essentially the same cast of characters that are going to run the country for the next few years. But so how they think about things. GST we've already spoken about. I think the bankruptcy code was another very big move. Again, it's getting ironed out, but I think the idea was a terrific one, and I think companies now understand that when they take debt, there's a real obligation. I think it's a culture change that's going to happen slowly, but I do think that bankruptcy code was a huge initiative by the government. The third big one I would say is thinking about digital India and ensuring that everyone in India has a bank account. I think all the initiatives being made on the digital payment side. So I think the government's already creating the right type of enabling infrastructure and the right enabling environment for private businesses, private ideas to flourish. Um, we used to have the FIPB, which was the foreign, they used to, yeah, correct, and they used to, regulate some of, investment activity. I think they disbanded that, and a lot of that has now moved to, separate sector bodies. They have also, improved the foreign ownership limits in many sectors. So I think it's debatable whether we need, a separate investment czar, as you call it. I think it's an interesting debate to have. I do think that with what they're already doing, and pushing each sector regulatory body to do what they need to do, I think we're in good shape. I think our industry also has certain bodies that represent to the government, what we need to do to further incentivize foreign investments. But do we need a separate czar with a sort of a separate lens? I think it's debatable.
Well, it's great to see you do so well, and we're happy to see that. Um, is there something that you would like to share with our students, the incoming batch, and the rest of the IIMA community about you know just with people who want to emulate the success that you've had?
I mean, I wouldn't, it's very kind words. I think, look, we're all in our journey. As I was, speaking earlier today as well, I think this award does provide an opportunity for me and some of the other awardees to sort of step back and reflect on everything we've done. It's nice of you to call it success. I think, one of the things that drives me and drives many of us is, looking at the next, the next set of things that we want to do with our lives. But so I'd say success for me is still some while away. But having said that, I do feel, as I look at some of your young students, they're sitting on an incredible opportunity. I don't think there's a market like India. I don't think there's a school like IIM Ahmedabad. And with the raw talent we have, I think, you know, this group is really well placed to succeed. Um, my own experience, you know, I had a choice to go to Cambridge when I came to IIM Ahmedabad, and I chose IIM. And post IIM, I had a choice to go join an investment bank overseas, and I chose to stay with McKinsey in India. So I've always chosen to be in India. So the one thing I would say is, I know the lure of going overseas is exciting and, you know, interesting, and there are obviously terrific opportunities out there, but we shouldn't discount our own country. I think there's a lot of opportunity here, and I think, you know, if you want to be a professional or be an entrepreneur, I think you should really think hard before you know, move out of the country. The second thing I would say is that, you know, at the end of the day, um, you know, people say, look, a career is not a sprint; it's a marathon. I don't even think it's a marathon. It's snakes and ladders, right? You move a few steps forward, something bites you, and you move a few steps back. But all you've got to do is you've got to have grit and tenacity. You know, everyone is smart. You know, smarts is a commodity today. But you just got to have grit and tenacity. You've got to have perseverance, and, you know, like they do in snakes and ladders, keep rolling the dice, and you'll get to 100 at some point.
Well, Raj, it's pleasure talking to you, and congratulations again for the award.
Thank you very much for your time.
Sure.